Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? Or driven a route you've taken 100 times, and for just a second, you weren't sure where you were? Most of us call that brain fog. We blame it on stress, on not sleeping enough, on being too busy. But what if I told you that for some people, those moments aren't just tiredness? What if they're the very first ripples of something that started 20 years ago? Right now, the more than 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. 7 million. That's the entire population of Arizona or Washington state. And in 2026 alone, the cost of caring for them will reach $409 billion. But here's the number that stopped me cold when I researched this. For most of those 7 million people, the disease was already active in their brains 2 decades before a doctor ever told them anything was wrong. 20 years, silently, without a single warning. Today, I'm going to take you inside what science now knows about how this disease actually begins. What is happening inside your brain right now, 20, 30 years before any doctor could diagnose it. I'll show you the warning signs that researchers can now detect, signs that most people never knew existed. And I'll walk you through what the latest science, published this year in major journals, says you can actually do about it. This is not doom and gloom. This is information that could change the trajectory of your brain health. Stay with me. So let me start with the research that changed how scientists understand this disease, published in the journal Lancet Neurology and confirmed by researchers at Harvard Medical School and the National Institute on Aging. The pathological changes that define Alzheimer's, the toxic protein buildups, the structural damage, they begin 15 to 20 years before a single symptom appears. Some studies push that number even further, 30 years. Think about what that means. Someone who gets diagnosed at 70 may have had this process running silently in their brain since they were 40 or 50 years old, while they were working, raising kids, feeling perfectly normal. The clock was already running. So what is actually happening inside the brain during those 20 silent years? 2 proteins. That's what researchers have zeroed in on. The first is called amyloid beta. It's a fragment of a larger protein that your brain produces naturally. Normally, your brain clears it out, but in Alzheimer's disease, it starts to clump together. It forms what scientists call plaques, sticky, hard deposits that build up between your neurons. This starts happening 15 to 20 years before any symptom. The second protein is called tau. Tau normally acts like a railroad track inside your neurons. It holds the transport system together. But in Alzheimer's, tau becomes twisted, tangled. The railroad falls apart. Nutrients can't move through the cell, and the neuron dies. This is slow. It's quiet. There's no pain. For years, sometimes decades, you feel nothing because the brain is remarkably good at compensating until it can't anymore. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I'd notice if something was changing, right? Here's what surprised me most when I researched this. A landmark study looked at subtle cognitive changes, not full-blown memory problems, but tiny shifts in how well people could recall a list of words after a delay. And they found those subtle changes 20 years before mild cognitive impairment was formally diagnosed. 20 years. And the people in that study were living their lives. They weren't worried. They thought they were fine. The science says your brain knows before you do. Now I want to talk about a gene, because this is where it gets personal for a lot of people. It's called APOE epsilon 4, and it's the single biggest genetic risk factor for late-onset Alzheimer's. If you carry one copy of this gene, your risk of developing Alzheimer's is 3 to 4 times higher than average. 2 copies, 8 to 12 times higher. And here's what makes that number real. Approximately 1 in 4 Americans carries at least one copy of this gene. You might be one of them, and you might not know it. Research from the National Institute on Aging shows that in people who carry APOE4, amyloid begins accumulating in the brain even earlier. The 20-year clock starts sooner. But, and I need you to hear this, carrying this gene is not a death sentence. It is a risk factor, not a guarantee. What you do with that risk is still largely up to you. Genetics is one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole story. Because the research is very clear on this, there are lifestyle factors that accelerate the damage, that push the clock forward. High blood pressure in midlife, not when you're 80, in your 40s and 50s. When it goes untreated, it damages the tiny blood vessels that feed your brain. Poor sleep. And I did a deep dive on sleep in a previous video. But the connection to brain disease is even stronger than I thought then. During deep sleep, your brain runs a kind of cleaning cycle. It flushes out toxic proteins, including amyloid. If you're not sleeping deeply, the garbage doesn't get taken out. Type 2. Diabetes and insulin resistance. Alzheimer's has actually been called type 3 diabetes by some researchers because insulin plays a critical role in brain metabolism and chronic stress. Remember our cortisol video? Prolonged high cortisol physically damages the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming new memories. These aren't minor factors. Each one of them speeds up the 20-year clock. So what should you actually be watching for? And I want to be careful here because this is educational information, not a diagnostic tool. Please talk to your doctor if anything I mention concerns you. But here's what the research says about early signs that often appear years before a formal diagnosis. Difficulty with planning, not just forgetting a grocery item, but struggling with tasks that used to feel automatic, like managing bills or following a familiar recipe. Getting confused about time or place, not just what day is it, Wednesday or Thursday, but genuinely losing track of where you are or how you got there. Changes in judgment, making decisions that seem out of character. Financially, socially. Withdrawal from social activities. Research actually shows that social isolation is both a risk factor and an early sign. The brain pulls back before the person realizes it. And mood shifts, increased anxiety, irritability that's new, a flatness where there used to be spark. None of these alone means anything definitive, but a cluster of them, especially if they're new, is worth paying attention to. And now I want to tell you about something that genuinely changes the picture. For decades, the only way to detect Alzheimer's-related changes in the brain before symptoms required either a spinal tap or a very expensive brain scan. Most people would never do that unless they already had symptoms. But in the last 2 years, blood-based biomarker tests have emerged that can detect signs of amyloid buildup from a simple blood draw. Tests that look for specific proteins, like phospho-tau 217, that correlate strongly with what's happening in the brain. The Alzheimer's Association was preparing clinical guidelines for these blood tests in 2025. This is new territory. It's moving fast. What this means for you: for the first time, there may be a way to understand your brain's trajectory years before you'd ever notice anything. The question of whether to test and what to do with that information is a deeply personal one, and it's one I think you should discuss with your doctor. Let me share something that genuinely gave me hope when I was researching this. In 2025, the results of the U.S. Pointer trial were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. This was a landmark 2-year study of over 1,000 older Americans at elevated risk for cognitive decline. The participants, who followed a structured lifestyle program focused on nutrition, physical exercise, cognitive engagement, and health monitoring, showed measurable improvement in brain function. They performed like people who were 1 to almost 2 years younger in terms of cognitive function. These 2 years, in 2 years. And a separate study funded by the National Institute on Aging found that people who followed 4 or 5 specific healthy behaviors had a 60% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's. 60%. That's not a small number. That is a massive difference. This is the science speaking, not wishful thinking. So let's get specific, because vague advice doesn't help anyone. Based on what I researched, from the Alzheimer's Association, from the Pointer trial, from Harvard and the NIH, here are 7 things that the science says can genuinely protect your brain. Number 1, protect your sleep. Not just more hours, deep sleep. Your brain clears amyloid during deep sleep. Prioritize 7 to 8 hours. Treat sleep apnea if you have it. Chucky. Number 2, move your body. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain and actually stimulates the growth of new brain cells. 30 minutes, 5 times a week, that's the target. Number 3, eat for your brain. The Mind diet, a combination of Mediterranean and DASH eating patterns, has been specifically linked to lower Alzheimer's risk. Leafy greens, berries, fish, olive oil. Limit red meat and processed food. Number 4, control your blood pressure. Midlife hypertension is one of the strongest modifiable risk factors. Know your numbers. Talk to your doctor. Number 5, stay mentally engaged. Learning new things, a language, an instrument, a skill, builds what scientists call cognitive reserve. A mental savings account you can draw on if the brain is challenged. Number 6, stay socially connected. Loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a biological risk factor for brain disease. Real connection, regular conversation, meaningful relationships. Number 7, manage stress. Long-term cortisol elevation damages the hippocampus. Meditation, exercise, time in nature, find what works for you. Take it seriously. None of these are revolutionary, but combined, they are powerful. Remember the question I asked you at the very beginning. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why? Now you know more about what might be happening in your brain than most people ever will. You know that the process can start decades before any doctor would catch it. You know the factors that accelerate it, and you know what the science says you can do. I researched this, and what the research tells me is that this disease is not inevitable. For most people, not all but most, the choices you make in the next 5 to 10 years matter enormously. If anything in this video concerned you, please talk to your doctor. That's not panic, that's wisdom. And if you know someone who's been worried about their memory or their parents' memory, please share this with them. This information could matter. I'll put all the sources in the description below. Take care of your brain. It's been taking care of you your whole life.